If you've been looking for a new or certified Toyota, come be part of the team. With inventory arriving daily, we'll help you find a vehicle that works for your lifestyle and budget. We'll continue to ensure that your next buying experience is as safe and efficient as possible. Our service center is open with easy online scheduling and a quick, clean process to get you back on the road safely. Head to teamtoyota.net and be safe, be strong, be a team. It's the morning after another disappointing Phillies season has come to an end. This is the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman and he's Jim Salisbury. And Jim, it was right there for the Phillies. You know, they controlled their own destiny going down to Atlanta in the last week of the season. They could have overtaken the division with a sweep, but they were swept themselves. And then they ended the season on kind of a down note in Miami, finishing 82-80. So yes, they achieved their first winning season in a decade, but it's not really much of a solace given the expectations for the Phillies this season, the performances they got from some key players, particularly Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler, just prime seasons from those two that went to waste.
Yeah, winning season for me is zero solace. I mean, you finish 82-80, one win above 500, 2 games above 500. Yeah, it doesn't. This was a team that was, supposed to play in October, supposed to break that long 10-year October playoff drought. Depending on how you compute it, either the 5th or 6th highest payroll in baseball at $205 million. In other words, a huge payroll. Like you said, an MVP candidate, a Cy Young candidate. A winning season was a minimal expectation, and it's nothing to break out the hats and hooters about. It's nothing to have a parade about. It's sad that they have to, fight to the last day, this couple days of the season to even have a winning season. But this was all about making the playoffs. They did not get it done. Their drought is at 10 years. It's a major disappointment. It should be a major disappointment, a major embarrassment for everybody down at that ballpark because, I wrote about this the other day. Joe Girardi was right. When, it's all about winning. It's all about winning, competing and winning, and they don't do enough winning. They haven't done it for an awful long time. And you used the phrase control your own destiny. They've controlled their own destiny like 3 of the last 4 years going into the final portions of the season. One year they were in first place in mid-August, and they had a collapse. And then, last year was a big asterisk year because of the expanded playoff format. But they had a chance to make the playoffs, expanded playoff format right to the last day of the season, and they went down to Tampa Bay and got swept. And I often think about how different it would have been if they had won that last game last year and eked into the playoffs as like the 10th seed in a 10-team postseason tournament in the National League. Dave Dombrowski's probably not here. That might have been enough to save Matt Klentak his job as the GM. They might have went into this season with Matt Klentak as the GM if they could have gotten to the postseason, even with a losing record. So because there was such focus on just getting to the postseason. So talking about one day changing so much and changing everything. That was that last day of the shortened 2020 season. And then this year, they controlled their own destiny big time. I mean, they're up 2 games on the Mets on August 8th. They win 8 in a row. They're up 2 games on the Mets on August 8th, up 2.5 on the Braves. And they promptly lose 11 of 15, and the Braves make a surge. They teeter a little bit, but they never relinquish it, and then they make another late surge. Some awful finishes for the Phillies the last 4 years. Some awful finishes. Let me start in 2018. Down the stretch, they finished by losing 9 of 11. Lost 9 of their final 11 games in 2018. In 2019, they lost 9 of their final 12. Last year, 2020, they lost 7 of their final 8 and lost a potential playoff berth there, as we just talked about on the final day. And this year, they lost 6 of their final 7, including 3 straight in Atlanta, where they were closed out by the Braves. They'd gone into that series with a chance to, if they swept, it was going to be tough, a big challenge. But hey, They needed to sweep, and they ended up getting swept. They really, I thought, rolled over in Atlanta. Didn't show enough fight. Their offense was manhandled by the Braves pitching, and the Braves clutch characters in that offense got a bunch of big hits. So just to review, 2018 finished the season by losing 9 of 11. 2019 finished the season by losing 9 of 12. 2020 finished the season by losing 7 of 8. And 2021 finished the season by losing 6 of 7. And, they controlled their own destiny in those seasons, and they, promptly drove it into a tree.
Well, after 2018 and after 2019, the blame lied upon, the roster being not good enough, and also Gabe Kapler, the manager, potentially not being good enough. And then he goes out and sets a franchise record with the Giants in terms of wins in the season for them, as the Phillies just haven't made enough progress. I mean, yeah, they finished with a winning record, but they finished one game better than their prior best finish during this 10-year run, going 82 and 80. And Sunday began with the Phillies firing a couple of coaches. So let's go through that. I mean, Joe Dillon, the hitting coach, is gone. Juan Castro, the infield coach, is gone. Does it simply come down to the fact that the offense and the defense weren't good enough and they were the scapegoats?
I believe so, yes. I mean, it sounds that way. Because both are real hard workers, and I think both have the type of personalities that you want to be around in a clubhouse. I mean, there are personalities that wear guys out and they have to move on from them. Not these guys. This was all performance-based. I think there was such a disappointment with this team that somebody had to pay the price. Joe Girardi has another year on his contract. I still think they feel comfortable with him moving forward. I mean, clearly they do. He's coming back for the final year on his contract. The offense was so inconsistent in so many different areas. I mean, they would just go into these famines and disappear. I mean, and, the most recent one was in Atlanta, 6 runs in 3 games, and you're eliminated. So the runners in scoring position was so inconsistent. And so they made a change there. It surprised me a little bit on Dillon because I think he's pretty good. And 2 years ago, they went out and recruited him pretty hard from the Washington Nationals. And then 2 years later, he's not good enough to be your hitting coach. Makes you scratch your head a little bit, but you already said this is a performance-based business. And, when that happens, you make changes. Both Girardi and Bryce Harper and Harper was close to Dillon. He worked with him in Washington. Both of those guys mentioned after the game, they looking for somebody, they listed all the qualities they're looking for a hitting coach, but both of them mentioned game planning, how to approach certain pitches on a given night, starter or reliever. So maybe there was a deficit there that they want to correct. And Juan Castro, I think, is a very good baseball man and a very good infield coach. And I've had other people tell me that. I just think this is a case of his pupils letting him down. Now, whether or not he had enough impact on improving his pupils, okay, that's fine. Oftentimes the coach and the teacher takes the fall, but the left side of their infield, and he did oversee infield defense. The left side of their infield was awful. Didi Gregorius had a horrible year at shortstop, to the point where I don't know how they can put him back out there next year and have any expectations to be a contending team. That's how important that position is. It's typically the best defender on your team, shortstop. Right. And he was just close to the worst. And the other guy, Alec Bohm at third base, had a difficult year at third base, and he didn't get any better. I suspect that had a lot to do with Castro, with the decision on Castro. I mean, Didi at his age, with his range slipping, I mean, he kind of is what he is. But Bohm is that young guy that didn't get any better. So. And I will have to remind you, he was a poor defender in the minor leagues. There were questions about him as a defender in the minor leagues. I don't know if the best coaching in the world can turn him around, but we'll see. So they're making a change there. I think it definitely had everything to do with their left side defense. I mean, Rhys Hoskins is a poor defender, but he was a poor defender in the minor leagues. So, I don't know that he had the best raw ingredients to work with, Juan Castro in the infield. But again, Joe Girardi used the expression performance-based business. So it comes down to an inconsistent offense. That's why the hitting coach is gone. And it comes down to an inconsistent and a poor infield defense. That's why the infield coach is gone. And if they have a poor record again next year and a poor season, it'll be the manager that's gone, because guys are in this game. When your team doesn't perform, people in positions of leadership are accountable with their jobs. This year it was the hitting coach. It was the infield coach. Next year it'll be the manager if there's not a big turnaround.
Well, in talking about, Alec Boehm being a poor defender in the minors and Rhys Hoskins not being a strong defender coming up through the minors, the Phillies minor league development has really taken a hit here, as it has for much of, this last decade. And it was especially so this season. There were times in the month of September that the Phillies had 4 first-round picks in their AAA lineup, which is not something you want. You want those guys graduating to the majors, but they were unable to get productive years out of an Alec Boehm or a Mickey Moniak or an Adam Hazley or Cornelius Randolph, at least to the point that any of those guys was able to help at the big league level. And on Sunday, when the Phillies season ended and Bryce Harper spoke via Zoom, he talked about just the need for the Phillies to improve their minor league system. He was asked, is that possible for a team that is trying to win now? Can they improve their minor league system while also trying to spend money and end a 10-year playoff drought? But that seems to be Harper's, what he's zeroing in on right now.
Well, he's zeroing in on getting better team-wise, because he wants to get to the postseason. He's been here 3 years. He might win the MVP this year. 3 years of his prime have gone by, and they haven't made the postseason. It's a huge disappointment to him. Says he doesn't regret being here. He's committed. He wants to see this through. But he's also here for another decade, so he cares about the minor league system, because those are the guys that are going to help him get there, beyond next season and throughout the life of that contract. You mentioned all those number ones at AAA. How many were there? 5 or 4?
Well, there were 4, but there were 5. 5, I guess, at various points too, because Bryson Stott also made it up to AAA. He wasn't necessarily ready for the majors though yet, right?
Right. So eliminate Stott. So there were 4 of them there, and all of them were going the wrong way. Now, if you have 4 number ones going on an upward path, that's a good thing. They were going on a downward path, and that's a bad thing. So Harper spoke after Sunday's game. He did a little Zoomathon after Sunday's game from Miami, and he kind of gave his state of the Phillies address. Like I said, still committed to being here. Disappointing he hasn't been to the postseason. He acknowledged the team has a lot of holes. Talked about the hitting coach. Talked about some of the things they need going forward. I mean, he really has a handle on this roster and a handle on this team. He mentioned Hoskins could be the DH. He mentioned Boehm could go to first base or stay at third base. He mentioned that Boehm has to get better and be more of a producer offensively. He mentioned the possibility of seeing Stott next year. I think at some point Stott's going to be in play here, whether it's at short, third, or second base, because he swings it pretty good. Now, if he can pass muster defensively, you might see him at some point. I'm not saying April 1st, but you might see him at some point. And Harper, ironically, and it's not the first time he's done that, but ironically, he said, we can't continue to go out and just buy players. This from a guy they, at one point in time, briefly was holder of the largest contract in the history of the sport at $330 million. But he says you can't continue to go out and buy players. It's not sustainable. And he's right. The good teams go out and pick and choose their free agents, and they're always kind of pushing their own homegrown talent to the big leagues, young, difference-making talent. That also comes with a low price tag. That's how you sustain a payroll and how you manage a payroll. And they just haven't sent enough young players to the big leagues, at least enough young players that have made a difference. I mean, they sent Boehm here this year. He struggled. Played 111 games before being sent down. He struggled. They brought Ranger Suarez here. I mean, that's a pretty good thing. That's a really nice bright spot. But he mentioned they back before the trade deadline, he was talking about the possibility of making trades. And he said, we have a quote unquote depleted farm system. I mean, that was a very strong word to hear from a player. But he was right. It's a depleted farm system. It's a bleak farm system. And then he kind of circled back on it again yesterday in talking about the need for the farm system to produce that difference-making talent that can sustain winning seasons, so you don't have to go out and buy players all the time. Again, interesting comments. I'm writing a little bit about them today, Monday, and that'll be on the website later on. But, I mean, this guy, maybe some people might think he oversteps his boundaries being so critical of his own organization. Maybe other people, maybe people think that should be said in private, maybe to Dombrowski and the GM, Sam Folk. But you can't fault him for not doing his homework. He really does his homework. He knows what's coming in the minor league system, and he knows not a lot is coming. I crunched some numbers, and if you can bear with me, as I look through some of these numbers, it was bleak in the minor league system this year. They have a new farm director of player development, Preston Mattingly. He's got his work cut out for him, and it goes hand in hand with scouting because, a minor league operation, player development system relies on the ingredients, the raw ingredients that is provided. It is provided through player procurement, draft, international signings, and whatnot. But really a bleak season in the minor leagues this year. So in AAA, AAA East, it's a 20-team league, 20 teams in AAA East. Offensively, the Phillies were 17th in batting average at 236, and they ranked last in OPS at .635. And on the pitching side, in AAA, they were 14th out of 20 teams with a 5.03 ERA. They were 19th, second to last in WHIP, and they were 20th last with the most walks. I mean, not good. Let me try to run it through a couple more if I don't bore you to tears, Corey. In AA Northeast, 12 teams, led that league as well in walks. Ranked 11th of 12th in WHIP and 11th of 12th in ERA on the pitching side. And in AA on the offensive side, ranked 10th out of 12 teams in batting average at 232. And they were also 10th in OPS and 10th in strikeouts. So, right pretty much almost at the bottom in offense and, at the bottom in walks. Over at Jersey Shore, their high A team, 10-team league. They did not lead the league in walks.
Ooh.
They ranked third with 479. They finished last in WHIP. They finished sixth in team ERA. And let's see what else we got. Offensively, they were last in OPS and they were last in batting average.
This is pretty incredible.
And then Clearwater, one more last full season team stateside. The Clearwater Threshers, a 10-team league. They were fourth in walks, seventh in ERA, and offensively they led that league in strikeouts, and they ranked ninth out of 10 teams in batting average, eighth out of 10 teams in OPS. So not a real pretty picture. Numbers don't tell all the stories, but they certainly can help you tell a story. And what I mean by not telling all the story, is it instruction? Is it not enough talent? It's probably a little bit of all of the above. They're just not, and that kind of adds some perspective to what Harper's saying about, not getting enough guys here that make a difference, not getting enough guys here that when they come, they can stay and really make a difference, and how that has to change for this team to be a sustainable winning team, and how he really cares about that because he wants to get to the postseason next year, but he's also going to be here another decade. So farm system he has a really devoted interest to it.
Yeah, and some of those guys are going to be gone, right? I mean, even some of the prospects that the Phillies might be selling low on, it seems like Dave Dombrowski's going to try to just change things up here. Joe Girardi made reference of that in his post-game comments, talking about, he knows that some of these guys are going to be gone, not necessarily referring to young players. He's also referring to some of the players the Phillies have set for free agency. But it would seem that there's going to be a big-time roster overhaul for the Phillies this offseason, because it's not like they have talent waiting in the wings at AAA. And if those guys aren't helping you, maybe you can find another team that still thinks they have some promise.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that 40-man roster, they could churn half of that baby, I would think, or more. So I'd have to really dig in on it, but yeah, it could receive a major overhaul. They have a ton of holes at the big league level. My big question is, how many can you fill in one offseason? I mean, let's go through some of them. I also looked at some numbers. They were, I think they need a leadoff man and a center fielder. It'd be great if you could get that one guy in the same package. But, the big league team, leadoff on base percentage was 302. That ranks 29th out of 30 teams. And their number two man's on base percentage was 308. That ranks 28th.
Now, listen, that could have been a little bit different if the Phillies kept Andrew McCutchen in the leadoff spot. They had to move him kind of out of necessity because they needed more run production in the middle of the lineup. But that being said, even McCutchen had a down year from an OBP standpoint. I think he finished with like an on-base percentage of 335, which is right around the league average. So either way, you need more on-base skills at the top of the lineup. Ideally, speed as well.
Nonetheless, we're talking about 2022 now. Based on where you were at this year, you need more table setters because you got the MVPs swinging it in the number 3 hole. And you got Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins coming back. And, he's a productive bat. I think this year we gained a new appreciation for Rhys Hoskins. I know he had a couple really big slumps, but gosh, when he produces. And they're a different team. And they were a different team without Rhys Hoskins down the stretch. They really missed his right-handed bat. Harper missed his protection. So I just think they need, table setter at one. They got Segura, who can be a table setter when he's hitting. But you look at the contact he makes. Maybe he's more appealing in an RBI hole, like 6, or even 7. So, I think they could use a leadoff man. They're going to need a left fielder that can hit righties and lefties. A thumper. They don't know what they're going to do at third base. Is it Bohm? Is he going to go to first base? What are you going to do at shortstop? Can you really put Didi Gregorius back out there as a defensive liability? Does he have to go to third base? Does he have to go to first base? I don't know. Does he get traded? I don't know if anybody touches him off the season he's had. He's owed $14 million. So I don't know which way you're going to go there. But that's an issue. They need 3 starting pitchers. I know they come in next year with 4 at the top in Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, and Gibson. Eflin probably not going to be back until the leaves are back on the trees, right? Coming off knee surgery. So they're going to need somebody to fill that hole. I don't necessarily see it coming from within the system. And then you're going to need depth. Every team needs depth. They're going to, Kennedy's a free agent. They're going to need a closer. Hector's a free agent. They're going to need back end help. They're going to need a closer. So they have a ton of holes when you look at their defensive problems, their problems at the top of the batting order, their inconsistency throughout the batting order, and just the need to put pieces around Bryce Harper. So you don't have the MVP holding up the MVP trophy in November with no postseason to show for it. It's really tough. A lot of holes. I don't know if they can fill them all in one off season. I don't know if they can fill them all through free agency. I really think not. Dave's going to have to make some trades. I don't know if he has enough attractive pieces in the system or on the 40-man roster to make trades. And that said, with the right tweak or two, I still think you can be in it again next year, just like they were this year. Unless somebody goes crazy next year, we'll see.
Well, you asked the question, can they fill all those holes in one offseason? There are a ton of them. And if the Phillies don't just spend their way out of this, it's going to be difficult to adequately fill those holes. For example, they tried to fill a hole this season in the 5th spot in the rotation by signing Matt Moore and Chase Anderson. That didn't work. You can always find quote unquote solutions like that. The idea though is trying to find better solutions this offseason. And looking at the Phillies payroll for 2022, they already have approximately $142.5 million committed. So yeah, they have some money coming off, notably with Andrew McCutchen coming off and some of those relievers, but they already have about $143 million committed, including $27.5 to Bryce Harper, $26 million to Zach Wheeler, $23.8 million to JT Realmuto. They have no choice but to continue trying. They have no choice but to keep investing because those guys are in the beginnings of those contracts. I know we've talked about this a lot throughout the second half, but there's a very good chance the Phillies never again get the type of season they had this year from Bryce Harper or from Zach Wheeler. And most likely they're not going to get that season in the same year from those two in terms of Wheeler leading pitchers, Harper leading hitters. So if you expect that those two guys are going to take a slight step back next year and into the future, that gives you even more of a reason to need, more reinforcements here coming in.
No question. You have so much money invested in that trio of players that you mentioned, and they're all in their prime. You can't let them die on the vine. You need to reinforce them, and you're going to have to do that with some spending and, maybe a shrewd trade and maybe a surprise guy coming out of nowhere. But you're going to need improvement from Bohm. You're really going to need improvement from Bohm. You're going to need Ranger Suarez to keep doing what he's doing. Maybe not at that level. You mentioned Harper and Wheeler could take a step back. I mean, I don't expect Ranger to pitch at this level, with a sub 2 for his whole career. But I expect him to be a guy who takes the ball every fifth day and gives you a good chance to win and has some really good seasons here. It's going to be fascinating to see how they do all this. Dombrowski, I guess, is supposed to hold a little media session later this week. So maybe get some ideas, but he doesn't typically, reveal his cards very often, nor do most general managers. The one thing that I'm curious to see is, does he operate quickly and aggressively? Because last year he didn't come on board till mid-December. I mean, he made a trade for Alvarado, and there were times when that was a good pickup, and there were times when it was an adventure. It was like, oh God. I would expect Alvarado to be back, and maybe you can reel him in a little bit more with his command and control. Actually, I don't think he has any command. I think it's all about, to me, command is like control within control. I think you just have to hope you get some decent control. And but maybe with a full off season, Dombrowski can do more than just a Matt Moore and a Chase Anderson. They were kind of picking around the bottom of the barrel there, and late in the offseason, and there were a lot of focus on getting JT back, and they have him now, and maybe they can go out and do something bold and aggressive early, and then fill in around the edges to try to help this team, move forward a little bit. I'm kind of interested to see what they do with Joe Girardi, who would be a lame duck next year, pick up his option, which a lot of teams do because that gives you quote unquote clout in the clubhouse. I would tend to make him earn it. I would tend to make him earn it. Going to the last year of his deal without his option picked up. Once upon a time, Pat Gillick did that with Charlie Manuel. And they started a big push. They stayed right in it, and then ended up winning the World Series, having a big postseason run, and all of a sudden he had all the job security he needed. So I would tend to make Joe earn it a little bit in 2020, but we'll see.
Well, Jim, at the end of Bryce Harper's final Zoom session of the year with reporters, as he was leaving, he said, "I hope I talk to you guys in November," which he was referring to potentially talking after winning the NL MVP, which he's firmly in that race. And I'm fascinated to see who's going to win this thing, because there are reasons to and not to vote for Bryce Harper, Juan Soto, Austin Riley, all those guys.
It is going to be a fascinating vote. I mean, you mentioned Austin Riley. What an amazing step forward he took this year for the Braves. Phillies can only hope their young third baseman does the same thing next year. Harper had a magnificent season. I mean, he legitimately carried this team throughout the second half, kept it in contention. Soto had a remarkable season, a remarkable second half down in Washington. But, they weren't in the hunt. So it comes down to, do you believe that an MVP not necessarily has to come from a winning team or a contending team, but I think it spices up that player's resume that he put up those big numbers in the heat of a race, under pressurized situation, and in pressurized games night after night, where a player whose team waved the white flag at the trade deadline, they don't play in a pressurized game again during the regular season. And dealing with pressure and playing, in the cauldron of a pennant race, it means something. How you deal with that pressure. And I thought Harper kept this team alive throughout the second half, pretty much all by himself after Harper went down, and then all those nights when the offense would disappear. So, and the same thing for Riley. Riley had a lot more support in his lineup, a lot more support. I mean, like everybody on that team had 30 home runs, but nonetheless, he had a great season. Freddie Freeman, Soto, Brandon Crawford. I mean, somebody from that Giants team has to get some serious consideration, and it's probably Brandon Crawford, who was the steadying influence for a decade now on championship teams, World Series teams, and just goes out there and has a great team as a veteran player. For a manager, there were a lot of question marks about Gabe Kapler. Well, he answered all those. He'll be the National League Manager of the Year. Guys like Castellanos, who I think would be a great Philly next year. I think you agree with me. If he opts out and becomes a free agent, he's going to get some MVP consideration. And I'm sure I am missing quite a few. Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. I mean, how about what that St. Louis team did? So it's going to be a really tough ballot, 1 through 10, because you probably got 15 to 20 guys who deserve a spot somewhere on that ballot. But the question on number one, it might be Bryce Harper's, because he kept the team in contention all the way. Had a tough series in Atlanta last week, but he really kept his team in contention all the way. Posted some remarkable numbers, and it was funny because he, like you mentioned, I mean, he's been very reluctant to discuss the MVP award all season, or at least throughout the second half. When asked about it, he sidestepped questions and only wanted to talk about the team and winning and things like that. Said he wouldn't look at numbers, doesn't look at numbers until the end of the season. But, after the final out was recorded yesterday and their season was over, yeah, he did acknowledge that this MVP thing exists. And this MVP thing is on his mind when he after his probably 20-minute Zoom session where he took a whole bunch of questions on the state of the team, he signed off by saying, hopefully I'll be talking to you guys in November. So, yeah, the MVP is on his mind. He's going to get a lot of votes. I would probably say he's the front runner, but you never know how the voting goes. It'll be a fascinating night in early November, mid-November, when that vote is revealed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an extremely close MVP race. I think it's also going to be an extremely close NL Cy Young race. In the MVP race, I think that the more time that goes by here, the days that trickle by, I think people are going to talk themselves more and more into Juan Soto just based on the sheer absurdity of his numbers in the second half. However, as you and I talk about all the time, when you're playing in a no-pressure situation, it's easier to put up those numbers. When everybody's pitching around you, when you have no lineup protection, that makes it a little bit easier when you're in a 2-0 count seemingly every time you step to the plate. So that should all kind of matter too. In the Cy Young race, Zach Wheeler leads the majors in innings, leads the majors in batters faced, pitches thrown, leads the National League in strikeouts. He had a whip of an even 1. He's right in the mix there too. It's pretty much for NL Cy Young. It's Zach Wheeler, it's Max Scherzer, Corbin Burns of the Brewers, Walker Buehler of the Dodgers. Buehler kind of faded down the stretch. Scherzer has 35 fewer innings pitched this season than Wheeler. Burns has 47 fewer innings pitched this season than Wheeler. And that's a significant workload. I mean, you're talking about, for Burns, you're talking about the difference of that's like 9 starts, 8 or 9 starts. Burns has by far the best rate stats. I mean, if you look at his strikeout rate, his walk rate, his ERA, and his whip, he would win it if you just look at those numbers. But he also averaged fewer than 6 innings per start this season. Some of that was because Milwaukee was trying to protect him, save him for the playoffs where they were headed. But you can't deny that either. It's going to be a very close race. And the thing, too, is that, when you think about could 2 Phillies win the awards if the team doesn't make the playoffs, you have a different set of people voting on each award. So they don't know if Wheeler's going to win one or if Harper's going to win the other when they sit down to make their pick.
Yeah, and if the Phillies end up with the National League MVP and the National League Cy Young winner in Harper and Wheeler, I mean, that's just going to be like taking a big canister of salt and pouring it into a gaping wound, because you have 2 players like that having 2 seasons like that, and you fail to make the postseason for a 10th straight year. Just typical Phillies frustration.
Yeah, it's never quote unquote really happened that the MVP and Cy Young came from the same team and that team missed the playoffs. There's a little bit of nuance to it, because the last time that it happened was 1962 when the Dodgers had Maury Wills win MVP and Don Drysdale wins Cy Young, they actually tied with the Giants that season. Each team went 101-61, so they had to play a 3-game tiebreaker series, which counted as regular season games for statistical purposes. So the Dodgers lost that series, did not make the playoffs. So technically, Philly's in the same position as those 62 Dodgers, but either way, it just hasn't happened in quite some time. Would be pretty historic.
And all these years later, what, 59 years later, the Dodgers and the Giants, both with huge win totals. What, 108 and 106? I mean, what a division, huh?
Yeah, one of the best division races ever out there in the NL West. Not one of the best division races ever in the NL East, I'll say that. So that's going to do it for this Phillies Talk podcast. He's Jim Salisbury. I'm Corey Seidman. We'll catch you later in the week.